Open your mind.
Hello and welcome to Open Your Mind Radio. We are actually back up and running. We had a system crash, but we seem to be sorted now. We're back up on the stream. Fingers crossed, everything goes okay. These things sometimes happen when we have an important guest on the show, and unfortunately, maybe it's the alphabet agencies or maybe something like that. But anyway, we got it sorted. We're back up. The stream is going out there. So good evening to everyone. It's Sunday, the 16th of February, 2014. You have myself, Alan James, and obviously, as you know, Steve's away on holidays on his jollies, and he's missing a very good night tonight and a very important guest, a very good guest on the show. But we have a stand-in co-host who was more than happy to stand in, and we've asked him to jump in and help us with the questions and everything else, because my hands are full with pressing buttons and flicking switches and everything else. But good evening, JP. How are you doing?
Hi, Alan. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm a semi-Canuck myself, so this should be a very sort of interesting conversation. So hello, everybody, and open your mind. We're also simulcasting with Wolf Spirit Radio in Nevada and everbeyond.info, running out of Hong Kong, I believe. Yeah,
Brilliant stuff. So we're doing a lot of simulcasting. We have 3 streams and 2 chat rooms set up here, so we're definitely broadcasting to the world, all right. So, as we said, our special guest on tonight is the ex-Defence Minister, Paul Hellyer. Paul's just released a book, and he has loads of information regarding ETs. Paul was also involved in the disclosure project that happened last May in Washington. So we're going to be going over to Paul in a few minutes. But as usual, I just have a couple of announcements to make, and then we'll bring Paul in. Paul has been patiently waiting in our green room, as we call it. So I just want to make an announcement regarding the Girl Against Fluoride over here in Ireland. Aisling Fitzgibbons is delighted to be holding an information evening at the Cornucopia restaurant at 1920 Wicklow Street, Dublin 2, on Tuesday the 18th of February at 7 p.m. It's €5 donation for the talk. She will be joined by special guest speaker, hot-pressed journalist Adrienne Murphy, who will be discussing her year-long investigation into the Irish fluoride scandal. Now, there's 1 or 2 of the things that I have on the list, but you know what? We will announce them at the end of the show. We don't want to keep Paul waiting, and I'm sure you want to hear Paul and talk to us about information that he has in his background and what he's been doing. And I'm sure JP wants to, probably has a few questions for him as well. So, without further ado, good evening, Paul. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay, thanks, for a young fellow.
Listen, thanks a lot for coming on. I know over in where your time zone is, Eastern Standard Time over in Canada, it's during the morning, but we do appreciate you coming on. And, you know, as I just mentioned there, you have a book that's just come out, and you are...
Actually, it's not out yet.
Oh, okay. Do you know, do you have a release date?
It's coming out, and that's, when I'm not sure, but probably in 2 or 3 months.
Brilliant stuff, brilliant stuff. Well, we can talk about that. We can go into your book and talk about what you've written in the book and in bits and pieces. But I think what we should do is probably start off with a little bit of background of yourself, Paul, from when you went into government, and basically, more than likely, your eyes were open on information and you were privy to information that the general public weren't aware of. Can you kind of talk us through that part first?
Well, it's an interesting subject. Actually, I was elected to the House of Commons in Canada in 1949, which is a long time ago. And I was the youngest member of Parliament at the time, and later, 8 years later, I was appointed to the Cabinet and was then the youngest Cabinet Minister in a very long time. After a brief stint in opposition, when we lost 2 elections in 1957, 1958, I was appointed Minister of National Defence. And I spent most of my time, I was in that portfolio for 5 years or so, and more than just about anybody in the post-war period. And I spent most of the time unifying the Army, Navy, and Air Force into a single Canadian Armed Force. And this took most of my energies. So I was not really too interested in UFOs at that time. I did receive reports on sightings, and they were very similar, I'm told, to the UK sightings. That about 75 or 80% of them were were natural phenomena, and then the balance were genuine, unidentified flying objects of one kind or another. So my main interest was not kindled in this area at that time. So it's really only about a little less than 10 years ago when I started getting involved in the subject of the extraterrestrial presence of technology in a significant way. I had a young friend of French-Canadian origin in Ottawa who kept sending me material on the subject, and I told him I was too busy to read it, which was true, but he was a very patient young man, still is, a great, wonderful friend who keeps prompting me from time to time. And so he said, well, I'll just send it anyway, and you can put it on a shelf in case the proverbial rainy day comes and you're able to take a look at it. So he did that, and then one day he sent me a book called The Day After Roswell. Lieutenant Colonel Philip Corso, United States Army, retired, who had been in the intelligence business. And he was one of the first major whistleblowers in this whole subject in the United States, because they had gone through a very long period of really embargo of the truth. It's still on, but it was probably more effective then than it is now, because there are more and more people becoming knowledgeable in the subject and talking about it. So I said that it would be fun to read this book. I'll take it on my holidays, and the next year I tried to find it and couldn't, and so I took The Life of Pi instead. I enjoyed that. I read very little fiction, and I didn't really know until near to the end of the book whether it was fact or fiction, but it was fiction. The following book, the year I was looking for something else and couldn't find it, and there staring me in the face was The Day After Roswell. Well, so I took that and started to read it and was absolutely fascinated. And I asked myself at one or two stages, could this be fiction? And the answer, I said, was no, because I recognized the names of the generals and all of the air bases and so on that Corso was talking about. I had a nephew come along and said, what are you reading? I told him, and he said, well, I'm a skeptic. And I said, well, it's still a free country, more or less, so if you're a skeptic, that's fine. He went home. 2 days later, he phoned me and said, I talked to the general, and he said every word was true and more. So he wanted to know where he could get a copy of the book, so I told him. By then, I had finished the book and was convinced that it was legitimate. So, more or less, I guess serendipitously or whatever, I had been invited to speak at the University of Toronto, and I had intended to say no because I'm not a ufologist and I was not really up on this subject. But I was so taken by the magnitude of the issues involved in the extraterrestrial area that I decided that I really had a responsibility to speak out. But before doing that, I told my nephew that I was going to phone the general, and he gave him a heads up. And I phoned him, and before I could even say, hello, how are you? Because I had met him once at an air show. He said, every word is true and more. And then he went on to talk about the more for 20 minutes, which was the fact that there had been face-to-face meetings between United States officials and extraterrestrials, peoples from other star systems. And so with that assurance, I went to the colloquium a week later, incidentally just a week before I was getting married to the widow of my former best friend ever. And she was a bit reluctant for me to do it, but I said, well, it'll just be a one-off time, and that was the biggest inadvertent lie I guess I've ever told. But it was not deliberate. And so with her blessing, I went to the colloquium and said that UFOs were as real as the airplanes flying over your head. And from that time on, I have graduated from kindergarten to maybe grade 6 or 7 in this whole business and find it absolutely fascinating. And the problem is the more you look and the more you learn, the more you learn there is to learn, and it just keeps going on, and it seems as if it will never end.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the introduction, and I've been working at the subject in my spare time ever since. My main issue in life is monetary reform, to change the banking and financial system to avoid recessions and depressions, which are totally unnecessary. And that's the reason I went into politics, and that's what I've been working on for 60 years, and that's one of the principal topics in the new book that I'm about to publish. And also it has a chapter in the last one I did 4 years ago, which was Light at the End of the Tunnel, a survival plan for the human species. And the book I'm writing now is really based on the issues raised in Light at the End of the Tunnel. And it's a little harder punching and reveals quite a bit more information on various topics than I was able to put in Light. So that's sort of where I stand at the moment, and it's so fascinating, but I find that the major issues of the world are all tied in together. Mm. And I'll just mention the three, and then you can take it from there.
Okay.
The first is, the most important is global warming. The most urgent is the monetary system, because if we don't change that, we won't be able to afford to do what we have to do to save the planet from global warming. And the third is the extraterrestrial presence and technology, for many reasons, and not the least of which they have helped us find the exotic energies, zero-point energy and cold fusion energy that are necessary to substitute for fossil fuels. And now we have all of the components. What we don't have is the political will to get on with the show and save the world, which is still possible, I think, if we do it in about 7 years. But we've got to get some revolutionary changes in the minds and attitudes of our political leaders if that's ever going to happen.
Okay. Well, there's a number of subjects that we can touch base on that you just mentioned there. I just want to remind our listeners that, you know, we have communication channels. Well, we just let you know what they are. Just bear with us there for a minute.
The communication channels are email info@oymireland.com, by phone 046 927 1212, and you can also contact us direct through the OYM chat room.
Okay, communication channels are, you can go to our chat room on oymradio.com. If you go over to People's Internet Radio, there's a chat room there. And you can phone in on 046 927 1212. If you're going to phone in, just leave it for about half an hour or so we can go get the show started and get the information out there. Don't be too keen to phone in yet. And as I say, be patient. I'm here, I'm pushing all the buttons and doing the best I can. I don't have my sidekick Steve with me, my co-host with me. But JP's there in the background. JP's going to be looking at taking care of the questions on the chat room. And if any questions come in from the chat room, JP's going to be taking care of that and then just giving us a nod and coming in. But so, Paul, listen, the one thing I want to kind of start off with, before you kind of start reading, I actually read that book myself the day after Roswell, and I found it fascinating, brilliant information, what was going on. But when you were in government and you came across one or two things, what was your attitude? Were you, like most people, conditioned to believe that, these guys are, smoking, funny cigarettes and, they're off, with the fairies? I mean, what was your attitude towards UFOs and ETs before you really got into it? Paul, you there? You there, Paul? Yeah. Okay, we just, again, we have the old internet problems acting up again. Did you get that question okay for me?
No, I didn't get a question, no.
Okay, again, this is the problem. I'll just let our listeners know about this as well. We are trying to get people to move away from Skype because Skype is now owned by Microsoft, and ever since Microsoft took over Skype, all we've had is major problems. So we're trying to get our listeners and our guests and everybody over to, a different product. Uvo is one of them. because this happens, as I say, when we have somebody important coming on the show, the technology seems to act up for some strange reason. But I'll just repeat that question again for you, Paul. Before you, start getting into reading the Day After Roswell and the getting into the ET side, what was your idea of people who are into ufology and ETs? Did you think they were kind of a bit mad, a bit fringe, or what was your understanding of them people and the subject matter?
Well, actually, I didn't have an opinion. I was an agnostic, I guess. I had an open mind. I actually dedicated the world's first flying saucer landing pad in 1967 when I was Minister of National Defense. That was our centennial year, and a little town in Alberta, a little bilingual town in Alberta by the St. Paul, had this project, and they built a flying saucer landing pad and had me go out and officially open it. But I just did that because they asked me to, and they had a wonderful, beautiful invitation to people from other realms on the landing pad, welcoming anyone who wanted to come and visit. And I read my speech on that subject, and that was fine. But I really didn't have an opinion one way or the other because I had never had time actually to look into it, and I hadn't had enough exposure to people who knew what they were talking about to be really that interested. And there are two kinds of skeptics: one, the ignorant, and liars. And I was at that time in the category of the ignorant, in the sense, the dictionary sense, of just not really knowing because I hadn't studied the subject. Well, of course, once I went public, that all changed because I got documents coming in, all kinds of documents, some of them classified, some of them not, and dozens of books, and I read them all, or just about all of them if they made any sense, and most of them did. And then I was briefed by some of the best ufologists in the United States, Stephen Greer, Dr. Stephen Greer, who started with the disclosure movement, was one of the first to give me a 3-hour briefing, and then Ryan Wood and Michael Salas, and just one after another, Linda Moulton Howe and Paula Harris, all of these people that are so knowledgeable, all started talking to me and briefing me and showing me their books and bringing me up to date, so that the information came in very fast. And I said I sort of moved along from grade to grade, but this was all really new territory for me. And in my latest book, which I mentioned was Light at the End of the Tunnel, and which is available from my website, which you can mention later, I said I didn't know how much I didn't know because I didn't know how much there was to know. And that's the truest thing I've ever said, because it's a huge subject. I don't know anybody that knows the whole thing because it's so absolutely, totally vast. And it's like a scroll opening in both directions, not just one direction, but both directions, I guess, like the universe or the cosmos itself. And so all of the people I know in the business, many of them much better informed than I am, are still learning. And we're learning together and exchanging information and moving forward and trying our best to get the governments of the world, who in many cases know more than we do because they've been involved in the business for so long, to come clean and tell us what they know and how much interchange there has been between the species, the various species, and the governments, especially of the United States, but also of the UK and Russia and China and Brazil and other countries. So this is sort of the progression that I've been going through, and of course I've attended a lot of seminars, spoken at a lot of conferences, and listened to a lot of presenters. And every time I learn a lot more, and I'm still in that mode, and I'm putting a lot of what I know now into the new book, and hope that people will be interested in reading it when it's available.
Brilliant. And what did your colleagues think when you started to get into this? I take you when you were in government office, you probably were speaking to other ministers and other people in government office. Were they open-minded, or did they say, Paul, don't go down that road, leave it alone, don't investigate it? I mean, what was their opinion?
I think there are a few people that thought I was cuckoo, but a lot of people, a large number of people have said, well, we're beginning to take the subject seriously if it comes from you because of your integrity. And that was actually the reason that this young man, Pierre Junot, gave for choosing me in the first place, to sort of be the vehicle to get some of this information out into the public domain. And they said, you have a record for integrity, which is so good that when you say it, we can't ignore it. We have to take it more seriously than we would otherwise. So I think the majority of people that I talk to are influenced. That doesn't mean they all jump up and down and say, yes, we believe, but it means that they're more willing to go through past the stage of ignorance and do some studying, read some books and some articles and listen to some debate, and consequently open their minds to the whole idea. Now, the other interesting thing is, and especially recently when I've been getting emails from all over the world, are the literally hundreds and hundreds of people who write to me and say, thank you for going public, because we have had experience personally. We've seen UFOs. Some of them have been abducted. Others I think there's been contact with, in some cases. They have been reluctant to talk for the very reason that there's such skepticism, which of course is encouraged by governments. And the more that we can get people like that to now open up and talk, I think the sooner we will be able to put the pressure that's necessary on governments to get them to open up and start telling the truth for a change, so that the people of the world will know what they've been doing, what they know, and what their plans are, because their plans, I think, and what they know should be in the public domain. The United States taxpayers have paid enormous sums of money for projects that they have no comprehension of whatsoever, and they're entitled to know, and in my opinion, the rest of the people of the world are entitled to know too, because we're all in this thing together, and it's something that affects all Earthlings.
Why do you think they're not disclosing this information, Paul?
Why aren't they?
Yeah.
I think they have their own agenda, and I'm concerned about it. I think they've gone through stages. In the early stages, I can understand why immediately after the war that President Truman was concerned, and his advisors in the military were concerned, because they didn't know what they were getting into. They had played an important part in World War II, and they had the best weapons, they thought, or, they were up to date. And all of a sudden, they were confronted with a phenomenon that was out of their control, with technology that was light years ahead of theirs, and with, all sorts of capabilities that were beyond them and that they didn't understand. So starting with the crashes in Roswell, and of course there were crashes before that, and there was knowledge of what was going on in some cases in the military before that, but that was sort of about the time of when the two crashes in Roswell, when they started taking the subject very, very seriously. And we had a Canadian who got involved at that time, and he wrote a top secret memo to his boss in the Department of Transport in Canada, a department that I later became minister of, saying that UFOs were real, that they were more highly classified than the H-bomb, that the American government was taking the whole matter very seriously, and that there was a small group being put together by Dr. Vannevar Bush to investigate the technology and to see if they could figure out how the visitors were getting here and what kind of technologies they actually had. So this is, in those days, I can understand the need for secrecy because they were unclear as to what the Soviets had or knew, and they wanted to keep it covered up. But certainly, as the years went by and the Berlin Wall came down, and they found out that the U.S. was leading in this technology, the shared technology, there was no more reason for security to keep it, no more reason for secrecy. And I think it's just they have developed a cult of secrecy and are reluctant to end it, maybe because they have some plans that we are not willing to share with the world yet. And this is something that I propose to talk about a bit as time goes on. Okay.
I heard that myself when I was doing the studying and looking into this is regarding the consciousness of the planet. When the level of awakeness of the people who are aware of ETs, when it reaches a level that it's accepted, then when they come out and tell people that, yeah, ETs have been coming here and visiting, when people get to the stage, yeah, we kind of knew about this, you know, that's the level they want to get people at because they don't want a mass panic or a global panic on their hands. And I can understand the psychology, but I think we are probably at that stage, if not past that stage. And people,
I think you're right. I think we're past that stage. I think that's more of an excuse now than a reason.
Well, we know that, you know, the people who have the knowledge have the power, and I think there's a level of control there which they don't want to give up.
Well, that's absolutely true. I was a member of the panel at the Citizens Disclosure Project in Washington last May, as you may know, and I think the consensus of the witnesses, there were 40 of us, who gave testimony over 5 days to a panel of 6 former congressional people. The consensus amongst us was that the secrecy was no longer a matter of national security. It was a matter of greed and power, and that it could be reduced to those 2 words. And in particular, the Air Force, retired Air Force people who were speaking as witnesses there, came to that conclusion too, and it has nothing to do with national security, which is the cloak, the excuse cover story that they put out. It has all to do with a small group of people having inordinate power to run the world their way, and if that continues, you know, problems ahead. Incidentally, I'm going to have to plug some power into my machine here. It's going to go off.
Yeah, that's okay. JP, I'm going to bring you in here. You have a couple of questions here from the listeners. So when Paul just comes back there, what we'll do is we'll go over to the questions if you want to talk to Paul about them.
That's right. Well, the first thing I'd like to add is there's a mention from Chris. What a pity Ireland doesn't have a man like Mr. Hellyer.
Exactly. Well, can you imagine Alan Shatter is our Minister for Defence over here in Ireland, and you know, I mean, you just wouldn't get Alan Shatter coming out and saying anything. He's trying to bury an issue. We had 2 whistleblowers over here in the Gardaí saying about the corruption that's going on in the Gardaí, which is the Irish police, and Alan Shatter decides to bury it in the Garda Ombudsman. And he's burying the case. He's trying to hide it. Rather than pat the guys on the back and say, well done, we'll find out what's going on, he's trying to bury it. That's the kind of people that we have here in government in Ireland. But that's another story completely. But, Paul, are you back? Did you sort that out?
Just about 30 seconds from
right, so
it in.
Excellent.
Okay, we'll keep the stream live. So
everything
excellent. So, excellent. Okay, we're not going to lose Paul in a hurry. So we have a few questions from the chat room, Paul, if you're willing to field that.
I will try.
And I just also want to add, we're currently broadcasting on Wolf Spirit Radio, and Wolf Spirit Radio is run by one Dave Corso, who is, I believe, a cousin of Philip Corso. And Dave Corso has been involved in various other government projects in the United States. You went in the Navy, were you? But he's been involved in several of those projects, including Project Talent. I don't know if you've heard of any of those.
He was going to publish a book himself some years ago, but I guess he changed his mind for some reason or other.
Well, he's running a radio station which is giving out great information like this. So
This
is Dave doing his part in a real hands-on 24/7. I mean, he runs the station 6 days out of 7, and I take it on for the Sunday broadcasts. So this is Wolf Spirit Radio. So welcome, thank you.
Okay, JP, do you want to go ahead with the questions and have
sure.
Pass them over to Paul?
Right. Okay, so the first one is from Hawaii. Is there any relationship between the ET agenda and the financial collapse? That's the fascinating question.
The ET agenda and the financial collapse?
Collapse, the financial collapse. Is there a link?
CLASS?
No, collapse.
Collapse.
There's the financial destruction.
You know the way the banking system is being kind of, they're destroying things globally. Is there a link between the ETs and the collapse of the banking system, the markets?
It's a difficult question when it's put that way. The certain species that the U.S. government is working with, and the U.S. government, and the broader, what I call cabal, which consists of the banking cartel, the oil cartel, the international corporations, and certain members of the intelligence community in the United States, they're all linked together. And so, in a sense there is, but the collapse of the system in 2007, 2008 was not directly related to ETs. It was another one of their tricks.
Yeah.
The big New York banks decided that they could, a couple of them, could make money by crashing the system, just as they did in 1929, and so they went ahead and did it. And this was a devastating thing for millions of people in the world, and we're not recovered from it yet. So it's all part of something that some of us don't really like, because it benefits only a very small handful of people. The big corporations, the oil cartel, the banking cartel, and the top officials in the intelligence community, and the top officials in parts only of the armed forces. And they're what General Eisenhower referred to as the industrial military complex. It's hard to know where one ends and the other begins, because they're all basically, in my opinion, under the same direction, or same connected direction. And it's just one more reason for disclosure, and very soon in my mind, because the cartel at the moment has the power to crash the system again.
Yeah.
And if they did, heaven help us. So that's one of the reasons I'd like to get my book out soon, is so that we can try and persuade the powers that be in countries right around the world to use their power to resuscitate their economies, get people back to work, and start giving the middle class a bit of a break again before something really dreadful happens. So I know that isn't quite satisfactory, but that's the best I can do on that, because when you talk about the ETs, it's not one big ball of wax. There are many, many species. Mm. And the United States government is working much more closely with one or two or three of them than with the others.
Well, maybe we should bring in. There's one question which I was asked today, and I said I would ask you, which ties into what you just said about this thing. There's people go out there who talk about ETs, and they say there's a prime directive, and that the good ETs, to put them in one frame, is they have to apply the Prime Directive and not get involved. But according to what history tells us now, I don't know how true this is, Eisenhower did a deal with them. Apparently there was 2 alien races that came down in the 50s with Eisenhower. The first alien race, Eisenhower wanted to get the hardware, and they said, no, you're not getting it. And the second set of ETs that came down did give Eisenhower the hardware, but the deal was that they could have our software. And there's a book called The Uni Planet of Choice, which I've mentioned before in the show, which kind of talks about this. And a number of people have talked about this. And I think one of Gordon Cooper, the astronaut, I think he passes comment on this as well, that this meeting actually took place in an Air Force base in the 50s. Are you familiar with that? And if you are, can you elaborate on that?
Well, I know about it, but I'm not an expert in it. But I think there were either 1 or 2 deals. I think there could have been a second deal made by the MJ-12 with the Greys to exchange technology for certain rights, including being able to abduct a limited number of people and a certain number of cattle mutilations and this sort of thing.
Yeah.
But these are just things that we want the government to disclose. What was the deal, and who made it, and is it true that they reached a stage where they came to the conclusion that the deal was not being lived up to, actually on either side, because presumably part of the deal was that the government would have disclosure long ago, and the other that there would be limits to what the Greys would do. And we would like to know just to what extent the contract, if there is one, and presumably there is, has been lived up to, and if not, the extent to which it has been subject to abuse.
Yeah, I think we'd all, that needs to be disclosed, and it needs to be exposed to find out exactly what was on the contract and what the deal was. Okay, JP, you have another question in there from Chris, if you want to deal with that. JP?
Sorry, mate. Sorry, I just got a visitor here. So, could you repeat me?
Yeah, you have another question in there from Chris regarding the abductions.
I've got loads of questions.
Yeah.
They're pouring in.
I know.
We got some awesome ones here. First of all, let's and I'd like to try and attempt to kind of bring the questions together, like you were doing before, because we've got various people asking questions, oh my God, there's loads here. There's this one here. All right, so let's start with ones that are already in the chat room, and if this is from Chris, and if abductions are real and done by the Archons or Greys, why do the ETs that are allegedly have our best interests in mind allow this to happen? So basically, there's multiple questions in this, and I'd actually like to kind of go with you a little bit of the Earth history of which races are here and when they came, and what you know from the kind of information that you may have been privy to that us ordinary folk may not have. So can we first address the, I don't know, which one would you like to answer first, Paul, if you can answer? The first one was why do the good ETs allow abductions to happen? And secondly, could you expand on the Earth history?
Well, let me
answer the first
question. It is my understanding, and when I say my understanding, this is just gleaned from the information that is in the public domain, really, that the Galactic Federation has an agreement not to interfere except by invitation. And so they have not had, in recent times, apparently, an invitation to come in. And this has given those 1 or 2 races that are, or 3, or that are already operating with the United States, sort of a monopoly at the present time. And I personally feel this is one very profound reason why we have got to have disclosure. is to see if we haven't sort of limited our options unnecessarily. And if it isn't time to open them up and invite the people in who I think some of us feel at least would be much more concerned about us and our future and helping us than perhaps we suspect the ones that are already in situ have plans for. So that's sort of one aspect of the thing. Now, as far as the general is concerned, I've just started to read something about the history of ETs, but there's a story that's in several books about a flotilla of UFOs flying south across Europe in the mid-60s, and they were picked up by NATO radar, and it was feared, first of all, that it was a Russian fleet, and they were just about ready to press the panic button when the fleet of 50 approximately UFOs turned around and headed north, back toward Russia and the pole. So the SACEUR, and I guess it was the Supreme Allied Commander of Europe at the time, that was General, it'll come to me. I think he was the one who ordered an investigation, which took, I think it was 3 years, and they came to the conclusion that at least 4 species had been visiting Earth for thousands of years, and that they were the 4 that had been visiting, I guess, must have been pretty well benign because they didn't do us any harm that we know of. General Lemnitzer, that's who it was. And so our history with intergalactic beings is not new. In my book, Light at the End of the Tunnel, for example, I speculate that the Star of Bethlehem must have been one of God's spaceships, because there's nothing else that could have made the trajectory that it did, that could have taken the path that is ascribed to it. So these things go back a long time. And in a new book just being published by my friend from Rochester, New York, what's his name? It'll come to me, I hope. He goes more into the history of all of these things. He's done a lot of research on it, and I'm looking forward to reading his book, and certainly I'm going to promote it in mine if and when I can get around to getting a couple of good quotes to put in. Who's the chap that wrote, was it?
Which book is this, Paul?
It's a new one written by the well-known ufologist who lives in Rochester, New York, and who was up in Canada visiting recently.
Whitley Strieber?
Pardon me?
Whitley Strieber?
No, it'll come to me.
Okay. Well,
but I think it's one. It's like the secret history of UFOs, which also has a lot of this information in it. It gives a lot of detail of things that have gone by in recent millennia, really, and the pyramids and other phenomena from around the world, and interaction with previous civilizations and that sort of thing, which I think is going to be fascinating. Richard Dolan is the name.
Oh, Richard, yeah, we're going to have him on probably in a few weeks' time. We do have a contact for Richard. We have to send him over a link to and have a chat with him. But he initially said he'd come on the show, so that would be great to have Richard on and talk about what he's doing as well.
He would be a good man to have on, and I would guess from what little I've learned about his book in the 15 minutes I've looked at it, that it's a minefield or gold mine of information for just about anybody who is interested in these subjects. And it goes into a lot of the intrigues in the United States too.
Yeah.
So,
have you looked at the actual the seeding of the human race? Have you looked at that? The whole Anunnaki situation, and is that something that you've looked at, or?
No, not really.
You haven't gone in there yet. Okay, well, let's have a look at a few more questions then for you, Paul. There's loads of questions coming in, so we'll try and get through. We try and please everybody and try and get the questions over to them. JP, do you want to take another question there from the list?
I will be your questioner. I will inquisit.
Go ahead.
So I'm in communication with author Sean David Morton, who's sending me all these incredible questions. So let's have a look. So you've just said that you're not familiar with Michael Tellinger. He was talking about the idea that humans were bred as a slave race. This is not, but let's move to much more current issues. And this is pretty galactic energy. So he's saying the North Pole is moving, and is super technology, alien or high technology being used to alter the nodal axis of the planet and cause prophylactic earthquakes to stabilize the Earth?
Wow. Well,
all I know is that there have been forecasts that if we don't change our ways, terrible things are going to happen to our planet. And that's a pretty broad statement. But this was made by two of the chaps who were in contact in Peru in 1974. They said in 30 years and 10, will be sort of a turning year for mankind, humankind. And we either have to start changing our ways now, or the consequences for all of humankind are going to be very, very bad. And whether they mean just natural consequences like the results of global warming, or whether it's something more catastrophic even than that, I do not know. But if you go back to 1974 and add 30 and 10, that is 2014. So we are presumably this year, in the year when we have to change our ways and start doing something about global warming, start doing something about justice in the world, start doing something about creative instead of making more and more fearsome weapons, to start providing food for the hungry and water for the thirsty and clothing for the naked and all of that sort of thing. To build the kind of Earth society that would qualify for the other ETs who are more spiritually advanced. And so I'm hoping and making a pitch in my book that we will take advantage of the opportunity to start the ball rolling this year. Because if we don't, I just think that if we let the present gang and really I'm talking about the New World Order people, if we just let them go on the way they're going on now, I think we are in for very serious problems in the years and decades ahead.
I think you're right. I mean, 10 years ago, I read about the forecast of the weather conditions and weather patterns changing. They said that in 2009 would be a precursor to things that would happen in 2012. Now, we're obviously 2 years further down the line, but they were a little bit off. But their prediction of the weather patterns that we're suffering globally at the moment were kind of bang on. And I think you're right. I think something needs to be done. The problem is that you're dealing with bankers and politicians who are corrupt, who are part of the cabal, and who just are focusing on the complete greed Now, I suppose if you go further up the chain to find out who's pulling their strings, maybe you might find a negative element. Maybe you might find negative ETs. See, the whole idea of, I know you said, Paul, that the positive ETs said they won't come down unless they're invited. And I can pretty much say for a lot of people who understand what's going on with the positive ETs, please come down now. But the problem is that trying to get that mass call of the level of consciousness for everybody to do it. Now, for some reason, the negative ETs, it didn't bother them at all whether they were asked or not. They obviously still came down. So I think the whole prime directive thing needs to be put to one side with the good ETs. They can see what's going on the planet. We're destroying the planet and we're destroying each other. And I think they need to say, right, okay, forget about the prime directive. We're going to go down and help out because otherwise there's not going to be a planet left. What's your take on that?
It would be a dream that they would come and save us, but I'm not sure that that's the way the cosmos works.
Well, you're talking about universal law, and we should be saving ourselves.
I think we were given the power of choice, and so far in the last 50 years we've made just about nothing but wrong choices.
Well, is that the thing is with choice? We were given the power of choice, but unfortunately, if the people at the top are making the wrong choice, and we are dictated by them, and we are told that if you don't do what you're told, you're going to go to jail, or you'll be locked up, or you'll be shot, which happens a lot of people, obviously in the truth movement that reveal whistleblowers, then you don't really have free will and choice because you are controlled and manipulated by an oligarchy, a global cabal. Would you kind of go along with that?
Well, sure. This is, of course, the problem. Going back to the ETs who are here, you said they come down without an invitation, but if in fact the government of the United States made a deal with them, that is an invitation.
Yeah, I suppose I know what you mean. And what about
so they could say, hey, we had a deal with your people, and they broke part of it, and so why should you expect us to be any more honorable than they have been?
Yeah. And what do you think about? You probably heard about Project Bluebeam and the whole fakery of using holographic technology to fake an alien invasion, so they can make an excuse of that it's the whole Independence Day movie where to get their New World Order. I've said this before on the show about the psychology involved with that, where they can't keep putting money into the foreign wars because people are beginning to wake up to that. So what the plan would be, and Werner von Braun said this, Carol Roslin was on the show, and she said that the last card will be Project Bluebeam, where they'll do the fake alien invasion, and then we'll all get together as a global community and give all our taxes to fight the invading aliens. Have you heard about Project Bluebeam?
Well, I don't know. Is this different from her project for the space treaty?
Yeah, well, the space treaty is something that Carol's working on to stop the weaponization of space. But
I've been involved in that with her.
Yeah.
But Project Bluebeam, I think I'm not familiar with.
Right, Project Bluebeam was something that was said by Werner von Braun before he died. He said the last card will be a fake alien invasion. And we know that from, again, a bit of research is that we had Stuart Strudlow on the show, and he was saying that Project Bluebeam would use holographic technology to fake an alien invasion, plus they would use their own advanced technology, which they built themselves, to fake an alien invasion. And, that was just something that Werner von Braun said.
Well, I haven't heard it put that way before. The way that I quote Carol was that the von Braun in his senior years said they, and presumably by they, he meant the military-industrial complex, which I no longer just say is a military-industrial complex. It has been expanded, that whole complex, to include the bankers and the oil dealers and the international corporations and the intelligence community part of it. So
and
that
the prisons.
Presidents, yeah.
They had to have an enemy.
Sorry, did you say?
Still there?
Sorry, JP, what you say there?
Yeah, it's also the prison industrial complex.
The prison industrial complex, yeah.
Prison.
Yeah.
Well, I don't. Anyway, that the first enemy they would have would be the communists. The second would be the terrorists. And the third would be the extraterrestrials.
Yeah.
And I think part of the problem, as I see it, is if the United States has managed to replicate the technology of the Greys, and they have ships, as Ben Rich said, capable of taking ET home, and that a lot of them look the same as the extraterrestrials as far as outside looks are concerned, that the industrial complex could fake an attack.
Yeah.
And I know that I'm sure that that others, including Dr. Greer, are also afraid of that they will send a bunch of these things across the country and maybe fire a few shots at somebody and give the impression that this is a real attack from outside the planet.
Yeah.
In order to do what diabolical things they might have in store for us. And that would be my fear if we don't do something fairly fast,
Yeah, totally. Okay, JP, you got a couple of more questions there, but you have quite a few actually. But we'll try and get through them as fast as we can.
Yeah, I'll try and pull out salient ones which are kind of more pressing.
Yeah.
Well, we've got well, you were talking about the North Pole and the Norway spiral, which was this kind of effect. Was this produced? Do you know, Paul, if the Norway spiral was the origin was originated at the ice cap, like these Norwegian harp thing, and was that linked with the exceedingly cold winter that we had just after that?
Well, I must plead my ignorance. I'm not sufficiently knowledgeable in that area to comment on it.
Okay, that's fine. That's no problem. Okay, yeah, go ahead, JP.
Okay, next. Okay, so the Fed and how are they going? How is the Fed going to collapse the economy?
Well, it isn't. The Fed would do it only in cooperation with the big banks, and especially the Bank for International Settlement. They could change reserve requirements, for example, so that banks would cut off credit, or they could just tighten the money supply by raising interest rates, as they have done before. Remember that terrible experience that Paul Volcker gave us in 81-82, when they put interest rates up to 18% in the United States and 22% in Canada, and people lost their jobs by the millions. People lost their homes, lost their farms, and their businesses. They can do that same sort of nonsense because they have the power to do it. And we have. How many have any of you yet read the book on the Bank for International Settlements?
I haven't, no.
A new book. It's just been out a little while.
No, I haven't read it, no.
It's worth reading. It's a real revelation. It talks about the shady past of the Bank for International Settlements, which runs the world.
Right. Well, we had Karen Hudis on the show, who was a whistleblower from the World Bank. And Karen did talk to us about things that were going on and the corruption that was going on in the World Bank, all right.
Yes, but this is not the World Bank. This is the Bank for International Settlements.
Okay.
Most people haven't heard of it. They know all about the World Bank and the Fed, but they don't know about the Bank for International Settlements, which is sort of the control center for the banking cartel.
So that would be the central of all the banking systems, even the World Bank. that would be at the top of the pyramid.
Yeah, they're the central switchboard for the whole international banking system.
And do you think, Paul, that based on what's going on at the moment, because we hear kind of the good news and the bad news, but apparently there's people, if you want to call them white hats, let's just call them white hats for the time being, the good guys. They're talking about the bankers, the cabal. Some people say the powers that war rather than the powers to be, because the banking system's gone to collapse.
Say that again one more time.
Yeah, some people refer to them of the powers that war rather than the powers to be, because they're saying that there is going to be a collapse and the system is going to be shut down and the bankers are going to be closed down because of what's going on and what they're doing. And there's certain countries involved, like the BRICS countries, who are going to, leave, don't go near the dollar. They're going to use their own currency, or there's going to be a shutdown of the banking system and it's going to get reset with a new currency, because there's other countries who are on the good side trying to stop what's going on at the moment. Have you heard anything about that?
Well, there are things being done, but whether you can have a transformation without a crash or not, that is the question. There's certainly no reason to have a crash, even if you want to establish a new international currency, which would probably be what the Chinese and others are hoping for. So these are great unknowns, but you can have a peaceful transformation. You can have a smooth transformation, and I'm setting out the mechanics for that in my new book. Or you can have chaos. You can crash the system and then have the whole thing go down, and massive unemployment and so on, as we had in the Great Depression. Again, coming back to choice, the choice is ours. If you look at all of humankind and say that it's a matter of free will by the people who are calling the shots. And I personally would be very despondent if it weren't for the young people, because the politicians are in the pockets in many cases of the people with the money, but the young people and the people of the world have the numbers, and politicians are also subject to the numbers. And if they really think that they're going to be taken to the cleaners in the next election, they won't be reelected, then they'll start thinking and talking and acting. And so somehow, and this would not be possible without the social media, which is one reason that we should be concerned about any attempt to control the social media. And I'm afraid that that's on the target list for the cabal. As long as we have the social media, it's possible to mobilize the young people and have a world spring and have something really good happen. But if it were not for that, it would be a very, very bleak outlook indeed. So my major hope is that we can get enough education out there fast enough for the young people to rally around and say, yes, we don't need to be debt slaves. We don't need to be slaves at all. We can be free people, and here are some things we want done. And if the politicians don't do it at the next election, they're going to be toast, and we mean business. And let them get together in their thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions peacefully and change the system before it's too late. It's possible, long shot, but I still believe in miracles, or I wouldn't get out of bed in the morning.
It's very hard. I mean, over here in Ireland now, there's a lot of kind of there's loads of apathy where people just can't be bothered, or they're so fed up with the political system and what's going on that they just say, look, it doesn't matter who you vote in, nothing changes. And unfortunately, they're not realizing the fact that if you stop voting in the same parties, but at least use the vote to get, say, an independent or one of the new parties that have decided to use direct democracy and recall as part of their mandate and agenda, then something can be done about it. But the trouble is that in Ireland and probably a lot of countries globally, we have this kind of NIMBY effect, which is the not in my backyard. And as long as they are not affected, they're not really bothered. And I think the powers to be, Paul, they don't have a lot of empathy for the people. I think, they see us as cannon fodder and they just see us as useless eaters. So I can't see us getting much empathy from the powers to be or the cabal. You know, we know that they have a eugenics program in place to eradicate 2/3 of the population of the world. And obviously that's kind of confirmed with the Georgia Guidestones, keep the population of the world under 500 million, which is what they're looking to do. Is that something that you've looked into, the eugenics program, and why we're getting these chemtrails and why we're being sprayed and all this kind of stuff?
I have read about it, yes. And it's just one more thing that I would like to have the truth out about. Yes, as I say, it's a bleak situation, and I understand only too well from years and years in the business that as long as the banking system is in control, it doesn't matter who you elect. In the United States, for example, they pick the candidates for both of the major parties, they finance them, and then, in effect, they expect them to read the scripts that they themselves write and not to stray too far off and do too much improvising. And if they start doing a little improvising, as has happened once or twice, then you wind up being a one-termer instead of 2 terms. So the way the situation is, it's not good, but the banking system has to be changed, and it is the number one, the most urgent on the block, because only if the banking system is changed and sovereign countries start creating some of their own money, enough to get the system up and running at its maximum capacity, and getting people back to work and start using the technology, demand that the U.S. release its technology on zero-point energy and start working at it immediately, is anything really going to happen? So banking is the most urgent. It's only number 2 on the priority list, the importance, but it's number 1 on the urgency list, because unless we change that, then we're not going to have this massive transformation from an oil economy to what I'm proposing in my book. I said in my previous book we had 10 years, and I was being very optimistic in saying that. Now I'm saying we've only got 7 because 3 years have gone by, but we could do it with the same kind of mobilization that people my age remember from the World War II. Because at that time, we took all of the car plants and the washing machine plants and refrigerator plants and all those plants and transformed them into making armaments in order to win the war. Well, today we have to do just the reverse. We have to take all of the armaments plants and transform them into plants producing engines, zero-point engines, to put in every car, truck, tractor, airplane, and home on Earth in 7 years. And it's possible with that kind of mobilization. But that's a big job, but it is possible, and it can only happen if we change the banking systems and if sovereign governments, and in the case of the European Union, of course, they're going to have to change the treaty in order to, or some kind of an agreement to make it work, which is not impossible. And they start moving right now. And when I say right now, I mean this year, before it's too late.
Okay. JP, you have a question there from Agent Blue. You want to take that one? Oh, hang on.
Yes,
we have a caller coming in. Bear with me. Okay, caller. How are you doing? You're live on OYM. Do you have a question for Paul? All right. How are you doing? Patrick, is it? Hi, Patrick. How are you doing?
Just a couple of questions for Paul Hellyer. Back to free energy. I mean, we had the biggest example of it exists 12 years ago.
Oh.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
Well, not the 2 towers down. Every tower, every World Trade Center building went that day.
Oh.
A lot of people realise that, Alan.
Oh, you're talking about the actual weaponry used for the Twin Towers.
That's free energy, which could be turned to a peaceful.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like anything, Patrick. You can decide to use technology for good or bad. Unfortunately, the people who use it for bad is always the cabal, isn't it?
Yeah. But if we could wake up in the world and realise that it was shown to us that day that it exists.
Yeah.
It's not a theory, it exists.
Oh no, it definitely is there. Do you have a question for Paul, Patrick?
Another thing, like, back to the global warming thing, I mean, I don't know what he thinks about Al Gore, because I think it's just another false flag to get carbon taxes out of every country in the world. You know, I mean, there is things happening around the world, you know, weather-wise, but as for the global warming thing, I think it's just a load of, the whole universe is warming up.
Well, we can't do about what's happening in the universe, but we can do something about happening to us. And I've looked at the evidence, and we'll present a little bit of it in my book, although that's not a major part of it. But the evidence is clear that we are the chief culprits in global warming at the present time. And so we have to do something about what we can do something about. And if Mars is warming up a little bit too, fine. But we can do a lot to save our own situation. And as you say, and you're absolutely right, the exotic energy sources do exist. And unfortunately, at the present time, they're controlled by the same people who control the banking system and the rest of the system. And so somehow we've got to get the United States government to exercise their authority and to make the information public, and not only public, but universal and available to every single country in the world with a low, with a whatever it is. So a low charge for using it.
Yeah.
That can get on with the job and provide their own capability in any country with any manufacturing capacity at all, in order to try and get the job done in 7 years, and stop this infernal fire that we're setting by burning so many fossil fuels and increasing it all the time by flying more military airplanes around the world and doing all that sort of thing, which is another unnecessary addition to it. As far as carbon taxes and so on is concerned, I'm not interested in that sort of thing at all, because you're playing with numbers just like the people play with numbers and money. I'm interested in real energy sources installed in real houses and real cars and real airplanes, and that is the way you stop global warming, by stopping burning fossil fuels and using the free energy that's available everywhere in the cosmos, and getting on with the job, and that, as I say, right quickly.
That's brilliant. Okay, Patrick, that's great.
Lovely, Paul. Yeah, well said. That's brilliant. Yeah, it's just that, they just keep passing the buck, don't they? It's us.
Yeah.
Like me, you, we're the general Joe public. Yeah. We want this change, and they just keep saying, oh, yeah, we've got to tax you, but they're doing nothing about it. But I know what you're saying, Paul. Hopefully people like you will get... That's just
hocus pocus.
Yeah, it's just hocus pocus. Just their way of getting more money from us and screwing more money for us. But that's brilliant. Thanks for ringing in, Patrick. That's much appreciated.
Thanks for taking the call. Cheers.
Take care, mate. Bye-bye.
All the best, Paul, Alan.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I mean, the whole kind of... They have the free energy devices. I mean, Nikola Tesla showed free energy. He demonstrated free energy, apparently, in the White House in 1902. And this technology has been around for such a long time, but because, as you said, Paul, the cartels out there, they're controlling everything. They want to make money. And we even talked about the prohibition in the early 20s regarding the alcohol, and how the car manufacturing companies caused that. They wanted that to happen because they had electric cars, but they needed to have people buying petrol in the psyche. So the whole, the prohibition thing started. But that's another argument. I'm just going to go over to JP. And JP, if you want to ask Paul the question that Agent Blue wanted to know there.
Agent Blue. Okay. So I just want to say I so completely appreciate and honour the fact that you've come on to this show tonight, Paul. I really want to put that out there. I'm sure there's a lot of people as well, because of the kind of level that you've achieved in your lifetime. and the perspective that somebody who's been in that position has, also supporting the views of many, many people who are what we call waking up. It warms my heart because it gives me hope. Thank you very much.
Well, that's good, and thank you very much for your very kind words.
And we hope that more people like you start coming forward and talking openly to the public and saying what's going on, because we need more people like you out there in all governments and all countries. But
yes,
there you go. So that's just appreciate Paul and what he's doing.
Let's go on to Agent Blue. So now this is a very interesting thing, and a subject of some of the guests that I've had on my show Ever Beyond before, which is the subject of now what can I go? Targeted individuals, as they're known. These are people who, for some reason, it's like they're being experimented on without their permission, using psychotronic weaponry. Have you had any briefings on anything like that, Paul?
Not really, no, but I know that there are a lot of experiments being carried on that wouldn't pass muster if they were in the public light.
Yeah, totally agree. Targeted individuals globally, we've had people on the show who have been targeted and have talked about it and been microchipped. And it's just a slippery slope. And these people seem to be getting more and more targeted. And it doesn't take much, apparently, to be on the list to be targeted.
I think mind control is one thing we haven't talked about, but I think it's one of the most dangerous ideas in the world today or in the universe, and something we should explore fully and resist to the best of our ability. So I think we're just about out of time, aren't we?
We're just about to get there. Another 5 minutes, if that's okay, Paul?
5 minutes? Okay.
Yeah, brilliant. So, yeah, just one more question then, JP, and then we'll wrap it up from there.
Okay, so let's have a look here. Just on the speakers here. Let me go, just running back to all these questions. Where are they? Snowflake. So that was a bit of appreciation that you're getting there from the chat room. So collapsing the economy, North Pole, ice cap. Oh yes. Do you know anything about a real planetary defense system that is being put in globally?
Well, everybody knows about it, the Strategic Defense Initiative, don't they?
Well, would that be what Carol Roswell is campaigning against? Is that a disguise to put weapons in space?
See, I don't think we can deal with this one in the remaining time, but there's no doubt that when the Star Wars campaign started, that the idea of rogue missiles from North Korea or wherever was just a cover story, and that the real targets were extraterrestrial. The weapons, I presume, can be used either against Earth or extraterrestrials, but I think there was a panic, and it would be a good idea to find out officially just how extensive it is, and who we're still shooting at. From the outset of the visits, most of the air forces in the world scrambled airplanes to try and shoot down the visitors. In the early days, at least, they were totally unsuccessful for various reasons, technical reasons, which we haven't got time to talk about. But later on, as the U.S. replicated some of the weapons that the extraterrestrials had, I think they developed some techniques, some weapons that could be used against flying saucers, against visitors from other planets, and used successfully. So I think this is a great subject, a good subject that has to be on the table for disclosure. because whether or not we need it and whether it's being used, and if so, against whom, and how they identify who is friend and who is foe, I do not know, and I'm not sure they do. So lots of questions to put on the table when we get full disclosure approved officially and start getting a little of the truth out on the table instead of just a bunch of lies. We had one in I shouldn't maybe use this because I haven't seen a piece of paper yet. In Canada, they scrambled some planes allegedly against something and flying at 35,000 feet at 500 or 600 miles an hour. And the Defense Ministry, when queried, said it was high-flying birds. Well, if you believe that one, heaven help you.
Yeah. I think they probably confused it with swamp gas as well, did they?
Yeah. One of the most interesting things, and this is a final shot, at the Citizens Disclosure Project that Steve Bassett organized in Washington last year, a great success in many ways, was a little old, I don't want to make him look anything, but he was a small man, and he was a retired lieutenant colonel. And he made a very short presentation. He said, my job in the Air Force was when you report on UFO that I issue a press release saying it was swamp gas.
And that was it?
That was it.
Wow. Okay.
Period. And so that sort of sums up the way the situation, the way the system has been run for the last 50 or 60 years.
Yeah.
And the last question, Paul, is who owns this planetary defense grid, Area 51, Dulce? Who owns that? Who runs that?
That's the cabal.
Yeah. That's the cabal. That's the inner circle. That's the, if you want to put it down to 300 people at the top, probably less than that. Probably just a handful of people at the top.
A much smaller group, really.
Yeah.
And that's what some people call the shadow government.
Yeah. Yeah.
But President Clinton said he did not control.
Yeah, the government went the government, and of course the 23 trillion, I think, or was a billion that went missing after the day before 9/11 that Donald Rumsfeld mentioned the day before 9/11. He said
2.3 trillion.
Was it 2.3 trillion? Yeah, I mean that's just that's definitely shadow government. But listen, Paul, we know you want to get on and go. A big appreciation for you coming on here at OYM Radio and obviously talking to us. Can you give us your website and again just tell us your book, when it's going to be released, and any other information that you can give our listeners so they know where they can find out more about you?
My website is Paul Hellyer. That's Paul HELLYER. All one word, web, paulhellyerweb.com. And my previous book, Light at the End of the Tunnel, is still for sale, and it's also available from Amazon. And the new one, which is tentatively titled the Money Mafia, I think, should be available in probably 3 months, something like that.
Brilliant stuff, Paul. A big thank you for coming on. JP, if you want to put across.
Thank you very much, Paul. It's been an honour, and if you ever want some more airtime, I'm very happy to provide. My show is a few hours later on into your afternoon. So thank you very much. And on behalf of All Spirit Radio and No Borders Radio, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Cheers, Paul. Yeah. Okay, Paul, just stay with us there for a minute. We're just going to go off to a musical break, and we'll be back after this.
This is Open Your Mind Radio on OYMradio.com, UnitedWeStrike.com, and PeoplesInternetRadio.com.
And we're back. I hope we're back, yes. Just looking at the levels there, making sure that we're back there. Very, very interesting. Appreciate Paul coming on the show and talking to us about the bits and pieces that are going on. What do you think, JP?
Well, it's very interesting. I got a very good vibe, as we call it. In the Ray terms, he's 121, which is very good news. It's very nice. It's like he's a friend in high places, I would say.
Definitely. Definitely, and I think it'd be fantastic to have more ministers and more people in government come out and just talk about their experiences and what they know, rather than pass the buck and just kowtow to the system and just not say anything.
Yeah, and for whatever I mean, people die for a lot less than what he's doing through. So however, he's managed to keep quiet and keep his true intentions secret. Like he's actually a good guy, in the bad guys group. So he's had a difficult tightrope to walk, I would say, if what we're surmising is true.
But one of the questions I was asked, and I suppose it's quite relevant, is would he have signed a security? I meant to ask him actually. Did he sign a security contract or some kind of agreement? Him being in government, saying that you cannot reveal anything that you've come across, either inside government and when you retire.
Well, that's the one of the $1 million questions, isn't it? Then, and indeed, how much can he reveal as somebody who? I mean, he's well old. I mean, he sounds really sprightly, but if he was like a teenager, late teenager in the 1950s,
yeah,
in the 1940s even. Was it 1948? He was saying he was that. So new spring chicken.
Exactly.
Bless his heart.
Yeah, and so I don't know. Maybe that's another question for another time for him. But interesting information all the same that he talks about. I mean, I don't know how much he's gone down the rabbit hole to find out what's going on regarding the ufology, regarding ETs, and what's happening with the planet. I'm kind of constantly looking at websites and cross-referencing things. Again, I mention it time and time again on the show that I look at people like the Tolaks, the Cobras, all them kind of people, and just kind of try and get a common denominator that they all kind of agree on. Because they all seem to have different information, and this ET race said this, and this ET race said this. I don't know. I mean, this is kind of your bag now. I know you're going to be coming on OYM in a few weeks' time, and we're going to probably be talking about this in more than depth. But you have spoke to Tolak, and you spoke to who's the Alex Collier.
Alex Collier and Mark Kimmel as well. I mean, I've had an Andromedan jamboree. I even know where Andromeda is in the sky.
Fantastic.
How cool is that?
But why? I just can't understand why the negative ETs are going off and having the ball and having the party, and the positive ETs are sitting back on, well, we have to be invited. I mean, to be honest with you, I think the majority of people who are awake on the planet would be shouting out to them, just come down and help us sort this out. Now, there's obviously other people saying, and fair play to some people. I mean, they say, look, they aren't going to come down to sort it out. We have to sort out our own mess. But I do kind of stick to my argument that, they say, oh, well, we have free will and we make the choices. Well, I'm sorry, but we are controlled by a system. And we are slaves to a system. And so how can we have free will? If I have free will, that means I can go down and drive my car fast with no seatbelt, and, but you do that and you get caught by the police, then you get arrested or you get fined. That's not free will. Now, I know that's very simplistic, but that's not free will. Free will to me is you become a person who's responsible in society, and you are responsible for your actions. So if I decide to drive fast with no seatbelt and I crash my car and kill myself, well, then that's my fault. That's my problem. But to be stopped by the police and to be told that not only depending on how dangerous you are, you might be going to jail or you get a fine, that's not free will.
So, free will gives me the ability to create something new on this planet that has never been here before, or that hasn't been here for a long time. For instance, some kind of group or society that has particularly harmonious rules, or something like that. Something that is new. That's the real reason that we have free will. And it's not just so that we can go around willy-nilly hitting people on the head without any consequences. No, because free will also involves, because the structure of the universe means you can create something. Yeah, you can create it with your mind. You can think it into existence. And if you get more and more people to agree, it becomes more and more real, and it will manifest. Either somebody will have gotten that message and created it for you, and somehow it's you in time. Or it's something that you think, I want to build a chair. You get pieces of wood and you saw them up and screw them together and you make a chair. You start with an idea and it becomes manifest. So I want to go to Tolek, right? Because you did mention Tolek.
Okay.
And one of our listeners also mentioned Tolek and asked various questions about that, which I didn't think really was Paul's thing.
No.
But he was talking about moving into the fourth dimension and the fifth dimension at the beginning of this year, and what it would look like, and that we'd all get taller, and that we'd all be thinner and weigh nothing and stuff like that.
We would change to crystalline rather than carbon-based life forms.
So the silicon is replacing the carbon.
Crystalline, apparently.
Yeah, that's crystal.
Yeah,
silicon.
Yeah.
So because that's the next row along on the periodic table. So if you add an energetic layer to an atom, it goes down one row in the periodic table. So carbon becomes silicon. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Well, I'm still waiting.
Well, here's the thing, there have been changes, and people who are sensitive, like myself, I live alone, and, I don't like to deal in very large groups of people because I can feel everybody. I can sense people around me and things like that. So I can sense these energies. And I've been waiting for them to come in, and I've known that they've come in, and they quite drastically affected me. And I noticed other people were being affected, but they blamed it on something else. But I got 3 waves of this energy that made me not feel not hungry, for a start. I got some fantastic insights, and I was able to deal with the problems of the world with greater ease. I was it kind of gave me a bit like a wise, brains on steroids sort of thing.
Yeah.
And this, I believe, is what I've been calling and been waiting for, the galactic wave, or the ribbon, depending on your perspective of what you're looking at. And it's an increase, it's a download, it's a recharge, whatever you want to call it. We're all being recharged from the center of the galaxy. And it's a pulse that emanates at the center of the galaxy. It takes 65 million years to get here. Because it runs just below the speed of light. And we're, 26 million? No, sorry. Wrong. It takes 26 million years. We're 26 million light years from the center of the galaxy. So it takes sublight particles something more than 26 million years to get here, because they're not exactly at the speed of light. But anyway, so we're going to be hit by, and they call it the photon bell, and all sorts of other words are going to describe this. And this, I believe, is the transition to the fourth dimension, as he's talking about, because we're adding an energetic layer to our reality. Everything will be charged up more. It's like we'll become made of electricity.
Okay, so what
all
about
in a flash? And that's the energy level thing that is changing for everybody.
Is this the event that they're talking about?
The event, from what I can understand, now, according to Sean David Morton's book, The Sands of Time, the Vajra Papers, Chronicles, we're due for something like that in 2027. This is according to a future version of his own self that was looking back then, which was a day when all the ET craft blinked on. They all synchronized and switched off their cloaking devices. And and the world saw that we were not alone, and then they all went back again.
2020, so I can't wait that long.
Actually, it's not that long ago. It's not that long. It's 14 years.
Yeah, I can't.
From 13 years, indeed.
I might be here in 13 years' time.
Yeah, you're going to be around.
Still
you
doing
keep young, doing internet radio.
Still doing OYM. Yeah, I don't know. I know people. I know we all get impatient, whether spiritually or whether waiting for ET or waiting for something. But I think we do. Everything that's going on at the moment. Cobra talks about the event that's going to take place. We know they're talking about this pole shift that's supposed to happen. Nancy Lee, their Zeta talks about certain things that are going to go on, flooding, this sloshing of the water, and everything else. But we have 5 minutes for yourself, because I know you have to go off and you have to do your thing with Wolf Spirit Radio and Ever Beyond Radio. You have your show at 9, so 4 minutes. So what we'll do is we'll just sum up what you think about the what we did. Obviously, talk with Paul.
The sort of salient points that Paul was making. Really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The first thing was he's got his books, right, and he's outlining in his books the solutions that he sees to the problems of the world that we're being faced with. One of them was let's call it climate change, so we don't mess things up. And I'm going to say that climate change involves the pollution from Fukushima, the pollution from the Gulf oil spill, etc., etc. The messing about with our weather through HARP and IceCat and all those other high frequency transmitters. That's all global pollution. The pollution from Wi-Fi. Pollution is a problem. Global, climate is, that's going to be the least of our worries, I think, in years to come. We've got other fish to fry. And the first one is the corporation, and this is the thing that is run by the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve run by the cabal. And this is why we were asking this question: who has all the high technology on this planet?
Exactly.
Because if it's the cabal, there's no, there's less hope, it seems, than we have in order to deal with this problem. How can we, the people, with our pitchforks and spades, deal with high technology scalar wave devices that can roast a car into a pile of ash at 50 feet?
Well, this is what I'm kind of saying, because as well is that they, it's not so much help us defeat the cabal. It's more like, look, give us the tools that we can at least have a chance to fight these people. We have bow and arrows. The truth movement have bow and arrows, and the cabal are using machine guns. And it's just an uneven fight. Now, people are saying, let's see the ETs come down and save us. Maybe we have to save ourselves, but I do agree with the fact that we need the tools to at least make it a fair fight. And at the moment, it's not a fair fight. Now, I'd like to think maybe there is a White Dragon Society out there that are actually, doing something in the background. And Neil Keenan.
Do we have friends? Yeah.
Do we have friends? Neil Keenan's doing his bit, and X, Y, and Z people are doing their bit in the background. I don't know. There's so much disinformation out there, you just don't know. But listen, I know you have to head off and get ready for your show.
One last thing, Alan. I've just been given the exact date, which is September the 17th, 2034, which is known as the Day of Appearance, predicted in the Great Pyramid, it seems.
Right.
So there you go.
So what happens before that?
There's a lot of turmoil. There's civil war and a lot of mess.
Right.
It's, that's what they've been saying, for a few rough years. We're seeing the beginning of it.
Yeah. Okay. And then 1,000 years of peace and prosperity, maybe.
It'll be better after that.
Yeah. Fingers crossed.
But yeah.
Okay. Well, listen.
God bless you.
Give us all your details before you go.
Okay. So I'm currently broadcasting on wolfspiritradio.com. I have a show Sunday on wallspiritradio.com, also simulcast on nobordersradio.co.uk, and everbeyond.info/radio. That's my own personal radio station, where you can hear replays of all my shows. It's all JP all the time. Anyway, and so I'll be on Wall Spirit Radio and that group from the top of the hour. We're going to be talking with Nancy Hopkins and Luz Aguibena. After that is my show, Ever Beyond, and then we'll have Healings and Meditations for 2 hours, and then Evolution with Eva Moore. So do join us if you have the opportunity. Thank you very much, Alan. Bless your heart, and thank you for the opportunity of speaking with Paul.
Brilliant, JP. Well, listen, thanks a lot for coming on and acting as a co-host because, as you say, Steve is off on his jollies there in his holidays. Appreciate you coming in and helping out because it's a mad panic, to run everything with one person because it's designed for two people.
Yeah.
So
you need a navigator.
Yeah, you need a wingman. Definitely need a wingman,
yeah.
and Steve's my wingman. But listen, JP, thanks a lot for coming on. We'll pop off to a bit of music and we'll be back after this.
This is Open Your Mind Radio on OYMradio.com, UnitedWeStrike.com, and PeoplesInternetRadio.com.
And we're back, and that was Take That and Have a Little Patience. And it looks like that's what we're going to have. We're going to have patience if things are ever going to happen with the ETs coming down, as that's part of the show we were talking about. And a big thank you to Paul Hellyer for coming on to the show, ex-Minister for Defence for Canada, and JP for acting as wingman, as co-host. Much appreciated. Just apologies for people that we didn't get your question asked to Paul. We had limited time with Paul, and there were so many questions and so many things that we had to ask him. So we, it's just impossible to get all the questions over. So apologies for that. But maybe in the future, what we'll do is we'll try and get Paul on again, and we'll do a part 2 and try and get him on. Again, a big apologies for the technical glitches at the start. But you know what it's like when we have somebody on the show that's very important, or that's going to give us good information. Things start happening really strange and really weird. We don't know why that is. It's just one of them things. So a big apology for that. But when we do the podcast, we'll tidy it up a little bit. So we take out them little glitches so they're not too bad. But again, a big thanks to everybody tuning in to OYM. And we're streaming on People's Internet Radio and also streaming on the United We Strike Radio Marathon stream going out to the States. And we have chat rooms in OYM and also People's Internet Radio as well. So thanks everybody for listening. And Wolf Spirit Radio as well as Ever Beyond Radio as well. I think we're streaming on them as well. So just before we finish up for the night, again, thanks to everybody who came on board, came into the chat room and asked questions and had a general banter. Thanks again for that. Just to let you know, the Girl Against Fluoride is delighted to be holding an information evening at the Cornucopia restaurant, 1920 Wicklow Street, Dublin 2, on Tuesday, the 18th of February, this Tuesday, at 7 p.m, €5 donation for the talk. She'll be joined by special guest speaker, hot press journalist Adrienne Murphy, who'll be discussing her year-long investigation into the Irish fluoride scandal. Let's hope we get near that time, and we get near the time where we can get rid of the fluoride in the water and just campaign and keep campaigning and educating people and letting people know about the fluoride and how dangerous that is. Now, there's been a couple of reports out there. We'll probably get it out to the registered users regarding Germany actually turning around blatantly and saying that Wi-Fi is dangerous and that we shouldn't be using it. And I don't know whether people actually seen that report, but again, we'll send it out to the registered users on OYM, so you can have a look at the link and see what you think yourself. But more and more information is beginning to come out. I have noticed that. I have been looking around. The good news is that I have been doing a lot of research and looking at different sites and people sending links over. And there's more and more whistleblowers coming out, more and more information coming out and being released. And the cabal are finding it hard to cover things up because there's more and more people coming out. Yes, I know there's the 5 bankers now that have committed suicide, apparently. And apparently that was over gold. They were going to report the gold, the rigging of the gold pricing. That's one of the reasons, anyway, that I heard through the grapevine. So, but, there's more and more people coming out. So stay positive, stay focused as much as you can. Keep educating yourself. Keep educating other people and waking them up and present them with the evidence that you have. It's very, very important that you do that. And, next week, what we're going to do next week, the guest on next week, we had Tony Z from Synchronicity on. Now they're having a big, the event was originally called Alchemy, but the name was changed. But it's still going to be on in April. And so what we're going to organise is, we're going to organise with Tony, we're going to have a few guests on the Alchemy event. We're going to get them on the show, and we're going to be talking to them about what they're going to be talking about and what their area of expertise is, and what they are going to be just touching base on. So that should be good. We'll probably have about 2 or 3 people on, maybe next week, if the Skype holds out and everything holds out this end. We will check out the technical side of things and find out if there was a bug in the system, what could have caused it. We're not too sure at the moment, but we'll check it out. And we'll have Steve back next week. As I say, he's off on his holidays at the moment, having a weekend away with the family. And hello, Steve, if you're tuning in. And good to have you back when you come back next week. But for the time being, thanks to everybody, as I said, that came on the chat room and joined in and asked questions. Sorry we couldn't get to all the questions. But thanks a lot for tuning in. And thanks a lot for supporting OYM and the donations that you send in, because it does make a big difference. Every little penny helps. You know, every 1, 2, 3 euros, it doesn't matter. Everything helps to keep us on air and keeps the wheels in motion. But for the time being, everyone, take care of yourself. Have a safe week. Take it easy. For myself, Alan James, we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.